who went to a hardware store and needed supplies for some plumbing work that he was doing. And as he was leaving the hardware store, the owner said, "I'll see you in a little while." And the customer said, "Why? Is there something else? Do I need something else?" The guy said, No. The owner said, "No, you don't need anything else." He said, "It's just that every do-it-yourselfer who does a plumbing job, they mess up and they need at least 3 trips to the hardware store." Well, the man said, "I plan to be the exception." And then when he came back an hour later to get a replacement for the part that he had damaged, the owner said, "I'll see you in a little while." The customer told her friend, he said, "They did not see me in a little while. When I needed to go back the 3rd time for that part that I forgot, I went to a different hardware store." That's the way pride works. I don't want that guy to, even if he's right, I don't want to give him the satisfaction of being right. Pride is an interesting weakness, character-wise. It causes us to do or to not do all kinds of things with our lives and in our lives. In Proverbs chapter 11 and verse 2, it says that when pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with humility comes wisdom. Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 18 says, "Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall." Use the dictionary for the word haughty there. That's GH. James chapter 4 and verse 6 says it a little more clearly. God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. The Bible commentator William Barclay said, "Pride is the ground in which all other sin grows." And so this morning, as we think about this question, why are you so proud? Let's look at 2 Kings chapter 5 and verses 1 through 14. 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 14. It is the account of the great general Naaman. And if you've been part of our fellowship of churches, you know, we like to do Bible studies. And so we talk about the gospel and its importance so that everyone's clear about what the Bible says the gospel is, and sin and how it's important to know what that is. And of course, the word, because that kind of defines everything. That puts us all on equal footing. Talk about the cross and what really Jesus did and why he did it and why he had to do it for us. We talk about repentance, and then we talk about baptism. And if you've ever studied the Bible with someone and talked about baptism, you may have come to a point where you said, I don't know if this person really understands that God gives us a specific way to be right with him, and it's baptism. And maybe you looked at Acts chapter 2, verses 36 through 38, which is a great place. Very first Christian message. Jesus was a great Jewish teacher, and he taught to all the Jews. But Acts chapter 2 is really the first Christian message. It talks about repentance and baptism. Maybe you looked at several of the other scriptures that we have, and then you're like, I just don't think this person's getting it. Let me teach them something from 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 14. And it's the account of Naaman. And let me suggest that if you've ever done this, we haven't really understood what we should understand about what happened with Naaman. We perhaps, maybe not all of us, but at times have maybe said, we want to teach this person the importance of what they don't know about baptism. And if all you have is a hammer, then everything is a nail, and Naaman is what you want it to be. So first and foremost, let's look into the Bible and see what could it be besides what we want it to be. Naaman in 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 1. It says, "Now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier." So just right here, we see Naaman as someone who is viewed as successful. He's a leader of armies. He's capable. He's well respected. He's well liked. At this point in history, kings who had great generals were always worried that the general was eventually going to usurp them and try to become king. But even the king respected Naaman. He was a man of integrity. The Bible tells us that this man Naaman, who was a general for a country called Aram, was given victory after victory by the Lord. That is God. God was allowing this man to have these great victories. But at the end of verse 1 here, it tells us 4 little words, but he had leprosy. He was diseased. He had a very visible set of symptoms that went along with this disease. And unless he could be healed, he would die. That's what happened with leprosy. Here was this general and this warrior who was respected, even allowed to have victories by God, who was now starting to show visible weakness. Can you imagine if all of your success came from a certain thing and your physical prowess was now in question? And you would only get weaker and weaker because that was the way with leprosy. Romans chapter 15, verse 4 tells us what was written in the Old Testament was written for our instruction, that through endurance and through the encouragement of the scriptures, we might have hope. So this account of Naaman, although it is a historical account in 2 Kings, was actually written for us today as we look through the scriptures. And it's meant to give us encouragement. We need to learn from it that God gives hope. So there's a reason God gives this account, not just for Israel, because 2 Kings was a book that gives an account of the nation of Israel, but for us in 2021 with our masks on. Maybe we feel like we live in where are the lepers? Like, let's be careful. But Bible scholars tell us that leprosy is actually in the Old Testament used by God as a symbol for sin. When you see it there, when people had leprosy, it made them ceremonially unclean. They couldn't come into the temple. They couldn't even go near people. In fact, if someone was walking towards you and you had leprosy, the expectation was that you yourself would shout, unclean, unclean. So people would say you were supposed to be the warning for them. So you can protect them. But the implication is for sin. Just like with sin, people with leprosy can't really hide the results of their disease. It was devastating. It destroyed them from the inside out. It separated them from the presence of God in the temple, and they became outcasts. And there was no cure except by God. That's what sin does. Can you imagine if your sin, if you understand the Bible's definition of all the things that sin could be, if all the sins you've committed, and even your darkest thoughts, even your sinful, the things that you're tempted to commit, if all those were pictured and you had pictures of those with the label of what that sin is all over your body, or you had it tattooed on your skin. People like tattoos now. Imagine if you had a sleeve of all your sin and one up this arm. It's all your sin. So maybe you have it over your forehead and on your face. Can you imagine what your conversations with people would look like? Let me ask you, would you even want someone to get close enough to you to know every bad, evil deed or thought you've ever had? You might say, unclean, unclean. I don't want you to know what's going on with me. Stay away. I'm unclean. Don't see my depravity. Don't see my disease. But the hopeful thing here is that God heals Naaman of leprosy. And he offers healing of it. God covers over it. It's better than any of that laser removal stuff. God covers over our tattoos, our sin with the blood of his son, Jesus, with a new body, with a new life. And the story of how God heals Naaman here is a lesson in how God heals and how he even uses us to bring healing to those afflicted with true leprosy or sin. Point number one, only got 2 points. That doesn't mean it's going to be short. I just only have 2 points. Point number one, disease brings desperation. Disease brings desperation. Don't we know that right now? Don't we know that right now? Verse 2 here in 2 Kings. Now, bands from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, if only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of leprosy. Naaman went to his master and told him that what the girl from Israel had said. Verse 5, by all means go, the king of Aram replied. I will send a letter to the king of Israel. So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, with this letter, I'm sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of his leprosy. You know, first think of this. Naaman has a disease that is painful, terminal, visible, and he is an extremely powerful, successful, visible man in his kingdom. So the first person who actually gives him any hope that this could be cured is a slave girl in his house. Not just a slave girl from a land that's already starting to be dominated by his army. A slave who was a girl from a weak country is the first person who gives him hope. She's not an influential teacher. She's not some theologian, even from Aram. She's no one. She's just a captured slave girl from a future conquest. She is the weakest of the weak. She couldn't do much. What power would you give to someone like that? But she did what she could. And what she gave Naaman was hope. And she says, man, you should go see this prophet in Israel. This prophet, this man of God, in order that you might be saved or healed. Adam Clark says about this slave girl, see the benefits of a religious education. Had not this little maid been brought up in the knowledge of the true God, she had not been the instrument of so great a salvation. She just knew there was a God and there was a man of God, and God always gives hope. And so she said to Naaman, there's hope. She reminds us of the story about the salesman who got really depressed. He was having a hard time getting people to buy his product. I mean, he knew his product in and out. He knew the technical specifications. He knew how long it would last and how inexpensive it would be to replace. He knew all the facts. So he couldn't sell any of them. But he went to someone to get some help. He was depressed. I've done all this learning and gotten all this knowledge, and no one will buy my widgets. And so he went to his mentor to like this guy who was like the best salesman who would be the mentor. And he said to his friend, he said, you know, I've done all this and I've shown people I can't believe they won't buy this great product. I guess you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And his friend smiled and said, son, your job is not to make them drink. Your job is to make them thirsty. That's what this slave girl did. She made Naaman thirsty to learn something that he did not yet know. This powerful, well-respected, successful man did not know how to cure this disease that was killing him. And this girl brought something to him and said, hey, you should go check this out. There's hope. Sometimes that's all you have when you got a friend that's struggling and depressed and sad, and God offers hope. Hey, why don't you sit down with me and read the Bible? Or, hey, will you meet with me and my friend here and let's talk. Let's pray together, because God can do something. It doesn't take great Bible knowledge. You don't have to be a great public speaker to help someone be thirsty for God. It just needs three things. The first one is you have to know your friend has a problem. You have to know there's something that they're desperate. And then you yourself have to really believe, like the song says, that Jesus can fix it. Do you really believe that? And then lastly, you have to speak up and talk about what God is doing, has done, and you're sure will do in your life. That's it. That's all it takes to make people thirsty for God. You don't have to go to seminary. There's nothing wrong with go to seminary. There's nothing wrong with having a master's degree in Bible. There's nothing wrong with having a PhD in New Testament. But if you're not making people thirsty, they will never go get the drink that they need. Naaman is diseased here, and it causes desperation. He's looking for a miracle. And the one person who knew the God of miracles spoke up. And in her master's desperation, she was desperate to help in spite of her. What good would it be for her if she's just going to be a slave that much longer? But she knew there was a God, and she knew there was hope. So Naaman goes looking for this prophet, and of course, the king of Aram and Naaman believed that the most important person in a nation would always be the king. And if it's not the king, then it's one of his magicians or one of his healers there. And so they send him to the king. And in verse 7, it says, as soon as the king of Israel read this letter from the king of Aram, he tore his robes and said, am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? He knew it was a death sentence. Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of leprosy? See how he's trying to pick a quarrel with me. You know why I was so upset? He's like, he wants a war. He's sending his best general with a problem that someone said I can fix, and I can't fix it. It's a setup. It's an invitation for war. So then Elisha, the prophet, the man of God, steps in for God. In verse 8, when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message. Why have you torn your robes? Because he's faithless. Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there's a prophet in Israel. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Remember here, Naaman is an incredibly important man. And he's come here now through Israel. The king has said, all right, this is the guy to go to Elisha. And so Naaman is going from most important, most successful people to most important, most successful people. And so Elisha must be this important, successful person. And so he comes to Elisha's courtyard, and he probably has a military guard and chariots. He definitely does. And Naaman knows that Elisha knows that he's coming. There's been letters and agreements have been made. And Naaman is this wealthy leader, and he comes and he's got talents of silver and shekels of gold, and he's got all these great gifts, right? If you go to the doctor and you got a serious problem, how much are you going to pay? Talents of silver and shekels of gold, and it never stops. They keep calling you. But that's not going to happen here. He expects Elisha to be honored that this great man has come to his house. And he expects Elisha to give him the deference he deserves as this great man of this powerful nation. But look what happens in verse 10. Elisha sent a messenger to him to say to him, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you'll be cleansed. Can you imagine that? What's that like? Imagine you go to the doctor's office and you have great insurance, and you also have extra money for the copay, because you got to have insurance and the copay, and you got to be able to fill up the deductible if it goes beyond. There's all these insurance things that you got to know when you go there. So you got, how much money do I have in my account? But you go to the doctor's office and you got your insurance card and your copay in hand, and you know where your account is for medical expenses, and you're sitting there in the office, and the doctor sends out like the CNA, or maybe the second top receptionist, to give you the script, and never comes out to talk to you. Here it is, go do this. I don't know about you, but I'll be thinking, That's crazy talk. I'm not coming back to this doctor's office. That's not going to happen. Well, let me ask you, doesn't that depend on how desperate you were when you entered there? And are there any more doctors who have the expertise and the knowledge to cure me of this life-altering terminal disease? Because when you're in that situation and there's no one who can help you, you got to rethink what you think is important. You would think that would be Naaman's case here. Like, what's he going to do? He's come on this scene with Elisha, and Elisha has sent his messenger to tell him to go and wash himself 7 times in some river. So Naaman, he's desperate. He's going to die. He's diseased. He's lost hope. And so he finally ends up at this prophet's house, this place that he traveled, and Elisha sends the messenger to talk to me, the great man of Aram, who has a serious problem. Does Elisha not understand how serious this is? Verse 11 may mimic what we would do. But Naaman went away angry and said, I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call in the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Pharpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than any of the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed? So he turned and went off in a rage. Listen to Naaman. But why doesn't he come to me? Why doesn't he do my dance? Why doesn't he cure me? Isn't Damascus better than Israel? Aren't my rivers better than Israel's rivers? Shouldn't the one who heals me, who heals me be the one who heals me the way that I want to be healed? Shouldn't that doctor see me in his office and treat me special and smile at me and hold my hand and give me that magic pill that's going to cure me of this thing? I've got a problem. Shouldn't someone treat my problem the way I think my problem deserves to be treated? That's Naaman. Hopeless, helpless, but he's still not desperate. Someone who's desperate would have said, and what else? Like, this is a serious disease. Go wash 7 times, and then what else? Is it going to take more? Like, I'll do whatever it takes. But when you're Naaman and you understand who you are and not what you need, you could be headed for trouble. When you understand who you are and not what you need, you could be headed for trouble. I'm not saying that you shouldn't know yourself and your strengths and weaknesses. I'm not saying that at all. But when you are the most important person in the world to you, and no one can tell you any different, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. You want other people to dance to your tune about how you should be treated and what you should be doing. I should be doing the things that I want to do because that's what I want to do. And look at me and who I am. And that's Naaman. Point number 2, remember your condition and be cured. Remember your condition and be cured. Verse 13, Naaman's servants went to him and said, my father, if the prophet had told you to do something great, would you not have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him. And his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Man, servants played an important part in Naaman, this great man's life. These servants, these pagans, right? These idolaters, these non-believers, they worship for it. They have nothing to do with the God of Israel. They know their master has a problem and there's hope. And so they're trying to convince him to do what God has told them that he needs to do. Because Naaman is out of control. He's moving not closer to the cure, but further away from the cure. He's a successful, respected, hardworking, powerful man. And all of those things are getting in his way. When we know who we are and we are so awesome and you don't understand where I've come from and what I've done and how I got here, it's hard to be helped. But when you understand your condition, it's possible to be cured. Like, how would Naaman go so far from understanding his leprosy and where it's leading and to death to the only shot he's heard about, walking away angry? And he needs some friends, and instead of friends, he's got servants that have to convince him to be healed. Money, power, prestige, success, hard work, your life situation, my story, these things couldn't cure his leprosy. And they can't cure the sin in our own lives or anyone else's. It is not the truth that if you work harder on being a better person, that if you do more, that if you read more, that if you pray more, that you can save yourself. We are powerless to sin. We're powerless to the effects of sin. There's a lot of hardworking people that you know in your life, even powerful, hardworking people who came from difficult circumstances, who have broken lives and broken families because they understand who they are and how hard they worked. And so to do something simple could throw you in a rage. What do you mean I need to do this if I want my life to be better, if I want to have an opportunity for heaven? Look at all I've already done. Why should I have to do that? Shouldn't I be doing the thing that I think I should be doing? What is that? That's pride. It is so easy for us to forget what's killing us. So easy for us to go on and try to live a normal life. Way easier than if we remember our disease and we search for the cure. If we want to be cured, we have to remember our condition without God's intervention. Because sin, it's malignant, and sometimes it's contagious. And it's completely curable. That's what Jesus is all about. But it's always lurking in the dark corners. Sin is like the bad left. You know, you shouldn't eat leftovers after 3 days, but you got that one thing that's been in your fridge for a week and you think maybe that's good. And so you go for it and you get food poisoning again. Sin is that dark leftover that you just think is going to be all right to play with, and you end up getting deathly sick and have to go to the hospital. Naaman is proud. He was desperate, but he forgot his real condition. And so his servants have to come to him and, you know, they have to like coddle him, right? Like, what in the world is Naaman? What is Naaman thinking? We've traveled all this way. We got all this money. We got these, I love the 10 sets of clothes. I need to look closer at that. Why is that a thing? They're nice clothes, I'm sure. But his servants are like, what's going on here? So they say, my father. Look how deferential they are to Naaman, even though Naaman's the one who's going to die. They say, my father. If the prophet had told you to do some great thing, wouldn't you have done it? How much more then when he tells you, wash and be cleansed? What a really gentle way of saying, why are you so proud? I mean, that if you're CEO of your company is like having issues and you're able to share your faith a little bit, maybe say, wow, sir, I'm not sure what's going on here, but it really seems like if we just change this one thing, it would get a whole lot better. And that's the way, what's going to happen next? That's a nice way to share your faith with someone who's got a lot of power over you. Oh, well, let me try to tell you that you're being really proud without just coming out and saying, why are you so proud? But his servants gently say to him, why are you so proud? If this guy had told you to conquer nations and climb mountains, wouldn't you have done that thing? But he just said, go dip yourself 7 times here. And when Naaman was reminded of his desperation, He obeyed, and he went and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan. And then his skin was like that of a young boy, I guess, because if you think about skin, when you get older and you have hairy stuff all over you and stubble, you think, wow, that's the worst. So young boys, that's the big contrast there. Do you realize that when it came to obeying God and being baptized in the Jordan River, dipped 7 times, Naaman had this slave girl trying to convince him that God was the way. But she couldn't really convince him. So he went to Israel and needed to talk to Elisha. And Elisha couldn't really convince him the way he was talking to him. And then he had his pagan friends here who were trying to help him out. The least believing people in his life opened the final door that Naaman needed to be healed. It sounds like you plant this, one person plants the seed, one person waters it, and God makes it grow. This is the quintessential evangelism story for God. It's not just about baptism. Look, I was able to make it into evangelism as well. See how I did that? Because it is. God is good news. But people have to understand their condition and their cure. God is at work in ways we can't imagine for people to be saved, even saved from themselves. Naaman knew his need, but he was reluctant to obey this simple command of God. And that's how we get to our study about baptism, right? That's how we get to our study about baptism. It's so easy to rely on ourselves and in our experience and our finite minds and how things are supposed to work and our pride rather than to obey God. Now, let me ask you, is that Naaman or is that me and you? Because do we not all struggle with being Naaman as well? It's not just the person you study the Bible with, it's you, it's me. It's me, oh Lord, standing in the need of prayer. That's why it's so good. It's not the elders or the deacons, it's me, oh Lord. Every account in the scriptures, when we look at the Old Testament with Romans 15, verse 4 eyes, we know that it's for our instruction. It's not necessarily always for the instruction of other people. The story of Naaman is my story and your story. And Naaman went and he got cleansed. And thank God many of us went and we got cleansed. But we still play with those leftovers in the refrigerator at times. And we start feeling some of those symptoms of that disease. Are we still desperate to be cured? Could Naaman, this is the thing we say, right? Could Naaman have been cleansed if he had gone under 4 times instead of 7? Or 5 times or 6 times? No, God gave clear direction. But it wasn't the waters of the Jordan that cleansed Naaman of his disease, was it? Of course not. It was God. It's God alone. Just like Peter wrote in 1 Peter 3, 21 through 22, baptism corresponds to the waters of Noah's flood, and it now saves you also. It's not the removal of dirt from the body, but an appeal to God for a good conscience through the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Don't we need to often appeal to God? God has cleansed you. If you've repented and been baptized, God's cleansed you and he's washed all of those pictures and labels of leprosy off of you. But every once in a while, you remember some of those pictures that you liked and maybe we start to add a few on. Are we still going to God to be cleansed and to be cured? As long as we're on this earth, we'll consistently need God's cure in Jesus. The story of Naaman, it's not just about Naaman, it's our story. Let me ask us, do we have the courage of Elisha here? Why did Elisha do it this way? Why did Elisha send his messenger to this great man? Was he intentionally trying to provoke him not to be saved? Well, Elisha was a prophet. He was a man of God. He did this the way God told him to do it. He was inspired in a way that we can't possibly be. But do we have the courage of an Elisha to tell people hard things in their lives, even successful people the hard things in their lives, even one another, the hard things in our lives that need to change, that we need to obey God's words, God's way. This is our story. Do we have the sense of pagans to follow God's plan, to continue to try to convince people that God is enough, that we can do it, that the Bible is simple, but it's not easy? If we thought that we had a disease that needed some incredible cure and there was only one place that we could get the cure, we would do our very best to travel to that one place and talk to that one person. And yet we have the scriptures before us. Are we reading the scriptures and praying and continuously going to God? This is our story. It's my story. I have to look in the mirror and ask myself, why are you so proud? I have to see my own desperation for healing and never forget my own condition. When I look in the mirror and I ask myself, why are you so proud? It affects my search for God every day. It affects my willing to give gold and silver and fine clothing, whatever it takes, God. It affects my heart to be influenced for God and his glory. It affects my Saturdays of whether I'm going to go out and serve the needy or stay home and sleep in and be needy myself. It affects me in the fellowship. Am I going to be a unifier and an encourager? Am I going to be the one who reaches out to others, or will I constantly be the one waiting to be reached out to? When you see your need, you travel, you do whatever it takes. Am I going to be with my family group, whether it's online or in person? I want to be there. Am I going to buy the Hope Worldwide t-shirt? Hey, that's a silly thing. I just wanted to plug the Hope Worldwide t-shirt. All right. But listen, can you imagine we all go down and serve on a Saturday and all of us are wearing the Hope Worldwide t-shirt with the Salt City Church? You know what people say when you have, like, I don't know, something that marks you as part of a group? Oh, what group is that? And where is that? And tell me about that. Tell me about your church. What do you do? Where do you meet? You ever notice how that happens? When you're in a group and everyone is wearing the same thing, someone's like, who are you guys? And what's going on here? Maybe it affects that. I don't know about you, but in my past, I've been someone like, I'm not going to do that. I don't need that shirt. I don't need that shirt. I don't even go to that thing on Saturdays. Man, you have an opportunity. It affects how much we want to be together and have impact. Last week, we talked about having a hard heart or a soft heart. When you look in the mirror and you say, why are you so proud? That's a heart check. That's a heart check. Do I remember my condition? And am I still desperate for the cure? Let me encourage you this week, whatever it is in your life, go through this passage. Do you know more of who you are? Or are you still desperate for the cure? Look in your mirror at home and ask yourself, why are you so proud? And turn to God for all of your needs.